in spirit is to realize you bring nothing to the table with God. That as you come to God, you bring nothing to the table. See, if I measure myself by other men, I'm going to find some men I'm better than and some men that are better than me. So, you know, I've got some qualities, you've got some qualities, I've got some talents, you've got some talents, and we bring something to the table. But when I come to God, I must come to God poor in spirit. That is empty of myself. I realize I can't. So if you imagine righteousness has a scale, meaning you step on it when you weigh yourself. And as you step on the righteous scale, the needle doesn't move, not even a millimeter. It doesn't even shake. You can jump up and down on it. You can take a run up. You can do a backflip and land on it, and the needle doesn't move. And then you put your talents on there, your beauty on there, where you're from, where you was born, who you are, what you look like, your IQ. You put all of the good things about you on it, and the needle doesn't move, because this is what weighs righteousness. And then you step off it and you think this thing must be broken. And then you see God step upon it and the needle goes crazy. And actually the whole scale explodes, because God's righteousness is just far beyond anything we can comprehend. That is what it means to be poor in spirit. That at that moment you would realize, I really do bring nothing to this table. I have nothing. It's almost like, let me give you another illustration. It would be like having a pound and you're face to face with someone who's a trillionaire, and you want to talk about going into a partnership investment. You've got a pound, they're a trillionaire. Now, to give us some sums of how did we process a trillionaire, they say, I read this, and so you can study it, and maybe it's factual or whatever, but it will give you an idea of something. If you go back, I think it was 1 million seconds. If you go back in time 1 million seconds, it will take you, I think it's something like 3 days, some days. You'll go back 10 or 11 days, something like that. It's days. If you went back 1 billion seconds, it would take you into the 80s. If you went back 1 trillion seconds, it's something like 30,000 years into the past. Beyond that, it's 30,000 years before Christ or something ridiculous. That's 1 trillion. So we spoke about 1 million, 1 billion, 1 trillion. That's the amount 1 trillion is. Now imagine having a pound and then you're with a trillionaire. You'd feel this is insignificant. This pound can do nothing as we are. I have no bargaining tool. I have nothing to offer here. All I can do is plead for grace and mercy. Please help me. That's how we have to come to God. Jesus is saying, this is the beginning. This is how the Beatitudes begin. This is how the Sermon on the Mount begins. It must start with us understanding our utter emptiness before God. We bring nothing to the table. See, this is spiritual. When we stand before God, we're talking about real Jesus, not this plastic fake one. Real Jesus says, you better understand, you've got to become poor in spirit to enter in. You got to become poor in spirit to even start this campaign. Jesus is not going to preach a sermon and then say, okay, now try this, really set your IQ to this. Jesus is saying, before I even start, you better realize you can't do this. That's the first thing. You got to realize you cannot do this in your own ability and your own strength, and theirs is the kingdom of God. The real Jesus is not into Photoshop. Now, I use Photoshop and I know what it's about. You bring an image in and you can touch it up a bit, change skin tones, remove blemishes, fade, squeeze, pull, amplify, smooth over, all of those things. Jesus, some people think that's what Christianity is. I'm going to come to the church and they're just going to take a few spots off here and change this and make me a little bit better. And I go on with my same life, the same way, but just looking a little bit nicer, a bit better. Jesus is not the real Jesus is not into Photoshop. The real Jesus is a artist. He creates masterpiece. Anybody who is a real artist wants a blank canvas. And Jesus is saying, first, I need a blank canvas. I bring nothing, Jesus, to the table. And that is what God is saying. Blessed are those who are poor in spirit, who have emptied themselves, that realize that they need to empty themselves. This is sobering, but it's also a blessing, because Jesus is saying you don't need to bring anything. There's no entrance fee into the kingdom of God. There is emptiness. That once I realize I'm empty, I'm at the best place to receive Christ. Once I realize, you know what, I have nothing to bring. I don't need to bring my insight. You may be in church and you think, I'm not as clever as the other people, I'm not as smart as the other people, I don't fit in here, I don't have these natural abilities, I'm not like everybody else, I don't look like everybody else. All of these things, and the devil will always attack you with that in the church. He'll be like, oh look, everybody's from here, or everybody's looks like that, or everybody's smarter than you. But Jesus is saying that doesn't matter. The kingdom of God is for those who are empty, those who are poor in spirit. That if you'll come and just say, I have nothing to bring, but I'm coming, and Jesus says, that's the one that has access to the kingdom of God. The kingdom of God has two elements to it, and so it's now and it's to come. We understand the fullness of the kingdom of God. The realization of it is to come, that one day Christ will return as king, and when he comes, those who are poor in spirit, they will enter into that kingdom. It's not just to come, it's also now, that we can experience his authority, his power, his dominion in our lives. And when you're poor in spirit, you have the real Jesus, and that means I can have victory over my sin, over my flesh, over my depression, over my hopelessness, over my anger. And that's because I'm in his kingdom, and in his kingdom he rules. Those things don't rule. And so by becoming poor in spirit, losing confidence in self, but gaining confidence in God, that I live a more productive and impactful life now. I pray this is clear. I pray this has blessed you. Like we always say, do all the other stuff, but more than anything, share what God is speaking to you about with somebody else. And then that's going to help you to grow and understand more. God bless.